Today we're being blessed by a visit from Dan Stone from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We're certainly keen users of their impact calculator. I get my kudos in first, Dan. But please go ahead and tell us all about yourself and what you're going to talk about. All
great. Sure, that's brilliant. Yeah, so I'm Dan Stone. My history is that I'm a chartered town planner. That's my kind of profession, but I've kind of moved sideways and become more of a kind of policy wonk, covering all of the work that we do in CSE, basically. And I'll just get my presentation up. So I'm going to talk mainly about the future energy landscapes kind of methodology, which is a really exciting bit of work we've been doing for the last couple of years. But before I get into that, I'll just flash through all of the work that my team does. And I'm hoping that you're not going to ask me detailed questions about it, because I probably won't know the answers about some of it. So hold on, So we're a national charity based in Bristol, but we work nationwide. We've been around for about 40 years. We do lots of work with government and also with communities, really supporting them to take action on the climate. And so this is a screenshot from my team's part of our website, just sort of summarizing all of the work that we do, basically. So we've got lots of work about kind of supporting your community, some of which I'll go through. I'm obviously a chartered planner, and so we've got planning projects as well. We've got data and innovation projects. We've got programs for kind of parish and town councils. We've got a youth training scheme, and then loads of resources about sort of community projects, basically. And so I'd just encourage you to have a nose around our website. You'll probably find something that might interest you. And so first of all, these are our kind of parish and town council workshops and days, really. And so it's basically a sort of practical workshop, where you've got a parish council and you want to take action on climate, but you can't quite think of what you can do. And so this aims to provide a really sort of practical way of sort of giving you ideas for what you can do and looking at all of the kind of levers within your control and drawing up a kind of, I guess, an action plan of the measures you would take, basically. And my colleague Leah runs that program, and her email address is there, so you can get in contact if you're interested in that. Then next, our impact carbon calculator. And so this is a really good bit of software, basically, where it enables you to sort of analyze the kind of what makes up the carbon emissions of your place, basically, and where they come from. So I've just put in randomly where I grew up as a kid, the parish I grew up as a kid, and it breaks down the kind of emissions, the source of emissions for that place, using a whole load of kind of information from the back end, which don't ask me detailed questions about it. I don't know how it works. And then the interesting thing is that you can look at the sort of consumption data and also the territorial emissions. So if let's say, for example, if Heathrow Airport moved to Monkley, very unlikely, but if it did, then the territorial emissions, the emissions that happen within that place, would be absolutely sky high. But the sort of consumption emissions by people that live there would probably be pretty ordinary, basically. So that's the difference between those kind of two measures. And then it enables you to compare your place to other places, either within your county or your area or wherever you like, or this is comparing the emissions on the left in Monkley to the national emissions on the right. And so you can see that for most of the emissions, it's broadly similar, but for housing, there's nearly 3 times the emissions in Monkley than there are nationwide. And so you'd be asking, well, why is that? What's contributing to those emissions? And is there anything that we can do about kind of bringing those down? So it's a way of kind of understanding what your baseline is, basically. And then this is another screenshot from our website about the kind of the support we offer for communities around retrofitting, basically, and also community energy projects. We've got lots of resources that will help you. And we're doing an increasing amount of work in the kind of retrofit space, and also helping communities work out how they can engage in that. So how they can help the kind of residents in their area to retrofit their homes to save energy and carbon, basically, and money, more to the point. And then we have a home energy team that give advice directly to people in fuel poverty And we also have a retrofit team helping people to retrofit their homes. But we also have a vast amount of information and fact sheets on our website about your home, basically. And so this is just, just the headings really. So about your energy supply and renewable energy and gas and you name it, insulation and ventilation, renewable low carbon energy, low carbon retrofitting, lighting, you name it, we've kind of got it really. So if you're interested, have a look. And this is just a bit of a snapshot. I can't possibly cover everything that we do. I'm just trying to sort of find things that you might be interested in. And then moving on to the kind of work that I do, the main reason I'm here is I want to talk about our kind of future energy landscape work. And so this started off from about, 5 or 6 years ago. It was a sort of joint project between us and the CPRE, the Council for the Protection of Rural England. And what we wanted to understand is why
you said something, but I might have assumed wrong what you said.
Oh, I said, are you happy to forward that on to Jane?
Let me just mute.
Yeah, would you mind muting yourself? Thank you.
Yeah.
And so basically,
but I assumed the wrong thing. So I said, you happy?
Sorry, Dan, you've done that.
Yeah, that's all right. Okay, so obviously we need to kind of decarbonize our energy system. We need to decarbonize everything, don't we? And obviously the UK decarbonisation strategy is about electrifying everything. So everybody's getting sort of heat pumps installed. There's kind of EV vehicles going on driveways everywhere. And obviously that's great, but we only actually decarbonize by doing that if the electricity that powers all those heat pumps and electric vehicles comes from renewable sources. And so with this need, with electrifying everything, and also the need eventually to retire all our fossil fuel energy generation plants, it means that our need for renewable electricity is expected to quadruple by 2050. And so the question is, how do we achieve that quadrupling of renewable energy capacity without the placards coming out, basically? And so in order to do that, the sort of benefits and costs and impacts need to be kind of shared really quite fairly across society. Otherwise, there will be a backlash, even if it's in all our interests. And so nationally, there's and so community energy has a role in that, basically, in terms of kind of building support for the future that we need. And so the question is, how do you do that? Because there is generalized support for all forms of renewable energy, basically. So each year there's an opinion tracker from central government, which is this graph on the top right. And so it's collecting public opinion on all the different forms of renewables. So solar, wave and tidal, offshore wind, onshore wind, and biomass. And basically the kind of support strong support is in dark blue, just support is in light blue, and then all of the opposition is in pink and red. And so you can see that there's strong majority support for all forms of renewable energy, basically. But what tends to happen is, whilst there is that generalized support out there, the moment a planning application is submitted, the placards tend to come out. And so, why is that? And is there anything that we can do to kind of maintain that support all the way through to something being built out, basically? And so that's the background for our project. And there's loads of research as to the reasons for this, which the reasons are well known. And that's that local communities don't feel they benefit enough from hosting renewables in the first place, that they're not really involved enough upstream in the decisions about where all this kit goes, and that their feelings about their kind of landscape and place are not really taken into account sufficiently in the decision-making process. And so we've designed this engagement process to try and sort of capture those insights, basically, and build on them, basically. And we think that we need more nuanced engagement processes if we're to roll out renewables at the scale we need to. So anyway, that's the background. So we devised this process, community engagement process, and the essence of the approach is that we go and talk to local communities about their place, Kelsa Breeze. And so what we do, we kind of set up a workshop, invite the public along, and we set the challenge really for that community. What proportion of your energy demand do you think you could meet from renewables around you, and where? And so we're kind of involving them in how and where the energy transition happens around them, the scales of renewable energy that might be acceptable to them, the landscape impacts they'd accept, and how they might benefit, basically. And what we've done is published all of those resources so that anybody can use them online. And it's a kind of open source resource, so you can adapt and change our approach to suit your needs, basically. And we can deliver training on that as well. So this is the process in a nutshell. I won't go through this, but this is how it works. And so how it starts is that we organize a public workshop, and what we tend to do is go out to the community and try and go to where people are to try and get them to come along in the first place. So this is a photo of us at a summer fete a couple of years ago, and you'll see that these vast maps that we draw, they're fully about 2 meters across, 1.5 meters high. And what we're trying to do there, people can't resist a huge map, and so it's a sort of engagement tool, but also it has a really constructive purpose, because what we're doing is we're collecting feedback as to the parts of their area that are really sensitive and those that are less so, basically. So if you're a local person, where do you walk the dog? Where's all the wildlife? Where are the quiet places that you don't want to see messed up? And conversely, where are the kind of less sensitive parts of your landscape? And so we sort of do that at village fetes and stand outside the school gates doing that as well. And then that's the first part of the actual public workshop that we do. So we get people to sort of annotate the map with, descriptive words and specific areas that they really value and places that they dislike and are less sensitive. And what you do through that is you get a bit of a consensus amongst the 25, 30 people in the room as to, the parts of their landscape that are really special to them and those that aren't, basically. And so you get feedback like this. So you've got, so there's an industrial estate here, there's a wood here. You can see the kind of annotations that we get on that map. And then what we do, having done that, we set the challenge. What proportion of your energy demand could you meet from renewables around you, and what might be acceptable? And then essentially what we do is we set out like an a la carte menu of the types of renewable energy that we think would be technically deployable around them. And so we kind of do research and find all the studies that have been written. You might have technical renewable energy capacity studies that a council would commission that would show, well, this area is suitable for onshore wind, this area is suitable for solar, these are where the grid connections are, etc. And so through that, you can draw up a kind of bit of a menu of what's actually doable around them. And that's what's represented by these cards on the table. And so what happens is that people kind of pick up cards and then put them on another table. And by doing that, they're sort of tabling that. So somebody might pick up a large card representing, let's say, a large commercial scale wind turbine, and I'll put it on the table and say, well, I'm suggesting this big, and I think the reasons this is acceptable are these, basically. I think it's okay. I think we need to generate our own renewable energy. I think the wind is really great. And then you have a debate, and through the course of an evening, you come up with the bones of a renewable energy strategy that everybody in the meeting supports, and you vote on it all. And then what we're also doing at the same time is we've got this Excel spreadsheet that we're populating with the choices that people make. And so prior to the meeting, you fill in kind of details like the kind of population and their energy use, both electricity and heat. And then you can sort of trade off. So somebody might say, well, I think one large wind turbine would be great. Let's do that. And so you enter one large wind turbine, and this graph will show you what that does in terms of kind of your emissions and in terms of your kind of electricity use. So here on the graph at the top right, you see it says electricity, and then it shows consumption and supply. And so the consumption is just their consumption of electricity, but you put in one large wind turbine and the blue chart will bump up, basically. And so you can see at what point you're kind of starting for that community to actually be kind of energy self-sufficient, or how far they're getting towards that goal, basically. And you can also trade off. Somebody else might say, well, I don't want one huge wind turbine in the area. I'm not sure I like that idea. So how about if we have 3 small ones instead? So you could swap it out and see what difference that makes. And the advantage of doing this is that it sort of keeps it really real. So somebody might say, well, let's put solar panels on the village hall roof. It's like, yep, great, let's do that. And so you can enter that in and sort of, and then you can see what effect that has in terms of the self-sufficiency of that community. And what you would probably see is that it would probably generate about 0.01% of that community's total electricity demand from renewables. So that's kind of how we do it. And so through the evening, you get a kind of, the bones of a renewable energy strategy that local people would support, basically. But obviously what you're doing, there's only 25, 30 people in the room. You can't say that they're sort of representative of the wider community because they're probably self-selection. Maybe people that are particularly supportive or perhaps in opposition to renewable energy. And so what we tend to suggest is that groups should then consult their wider community to see if the views expressed in the workshop are shared by their wider community. And so you might have a questionnaire or something, and we had a workshop, they expressed support for kind of, solar farms here and wind turbines and whatever they said. Do you agree? Would you support these only if they were sort of community owned or shared ownership, commercial, community owned? Or would you support fully commercial schemes? And so you understand what are the criteria for support, basically. And then, and just a sort of case study, really, because I think so far I've found these sort of conversation workshops to be really constructive and really positive. You might be a bit frightened, but actually you don't need to be. So this was a case, we did some of these workshops in Bath and North Somerset. And one of the areas we chose was Peasdown and Wellow, these two parishes next door to one another. And I don't know whether you know sort of Somerset and Wellow, but it is the most chocolate boxy, beautiful Cotswold village in the world, basically. I mean, pretty much in the world. It's amazing. And so I had a real crisis of confidence driving into this village. I was going to a kind of a summer fete to promote the workshop. And so you can picture me, I was driving down the main street that you can see in these photos between all the lovely listed limestone cottages in the center of the conservation area. And I was behind a queue of teenagers all on beautifully groomed ponies, basically. And so I thought, oh my God, this is just a total mistake. I'm going to be absolutely lynched. My car was entirely packed, jammed full of illustrations of wind turbines and micro hydro and solar farms. I'm just going to be totally lynched here. But that's not what I found at all. So I took this map intending to sort of get some feedback on the kind of, the sensitivity of the landscape, because it's kind of, it's an area of outstanding natural beauty. It's got green belt in it. It's got conservation areas. It's got tons of listed buildings. It's got World Heritage. It's got scheduled ancient monuments. You name it, it's got it. But that's not what I found at all. Although the people that came along on that day and to the workshop, they loved their area and they found it was very special, and they kind of identified areas that definitely should be protected. Nevertheless, the map that I brought along was absolutely festooned with indications of, put a wind turbine here, a solar farm here, district heating here, you name it. And so there was support for kind of onshore wind and solar farms and rooftop solar and micro hydro and district heating, and basically everything that was technically feasible, they were supportive of it. And that is more or less what I've kind of found everywhere. It's not that everything is supported everywhere, but that you can have grown-up conversations about this with your community, and provided you approach it in this kind of way, when you're asking sort of open questions, you don't present them with the answer, you don't need to be fearful about those conversations, and they're very constructive, and that support that we know is out there is genuinely shown. And so we did a sort of public consultation on the back of that, and the public consultation basically found the same thing and supported what was said in the kind of workshop. And so this was the output. So their plan, if it was delivered, would generate 800% of their electricity demand from renewables. So they'd be a net generator of renewable energy, only a tiny proportion of their heat demand, but effectively it would remove all of their emissions from electricity use within those two parishes. And so it's not saying this is the start of a conversation, and what you might have is kind of projects spinning out of this or neighborhood planning policies, but it's just very encouraging. And that's really what we've found everywhere, basically. And so all of the details, all of the resources to kind of run that are available on our website, and you can contact us if you're interested in running one for you. Unfortunately, we don't have funding to do this for free, but we can help you do it, or do it for you, or train you, depending on what your capacity is. And I know there's a couple of questions or comments in the chat, so I'll just have a look. So, have you managed to get funding to update impact? Is the data in it from 2018? I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry, but I could find out for you if you like. So I'm here to sort of take questions if there are any questions, basically.
Well, Dan, let me say first of all that was fascinating. Thank you so much.
welcome.
And I actually found it very invigorating. It's lovely to know that people are out there doing these sorts of things. I had just one question. There's no mention anywhere in your list of sustainable energy for the small modular nuclear plants. Are they total no-nos from your point of view?
Well, I guess it's not our expertise. We don't know anything about nuclear power really, and so it's not something we know about. And in terms of kind of what a local community could do, you couldn't through a kind of a parish sort of climate action or through neighborhood plan get a nuclear power station started. So I guess we haven't gone into that area because it doesn't seem something that a community would necessarily get involved in. It would probably be from central government and from kind of industry.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've got lots of questions and hands
Oh, sure.
raised, so let me suggest that we go to John Fagan first.
Sure.
Cool. That was well called, Dad. Loved it.
Thank you.
Loved it. It
Great.
gives you hope. It gives you hope. So many great things happening. Have you heard of the My 2050 calculator?
I've heard of various calculators. Is this I know there's one which is kind of, it's a scenario calculator. I don't know
Yes,
whether that's it.
yeah. I'm doing a screen share. This reminds me
Yeah.
of your map, but more. It's quite. I love this. Because you got your CO2 meter here, and then you got your digital twin, your virtual neighborhood, and then you can like tweak things. Like if you want to put in wind, you see the wind turbines drop and the solar. Yeah, it's lovely little tool. Reminded me a bit of your paper maps, but anyway, that's not the question. My question was around the cost of living crisis, and have you seen increased demand? Because like I've got a friend who rolled out his own wind turbine on his land, and through that it was an agonizing process. He gained a lot of expertise. So then he offered to do one for his local parish, and they were very critical of it. That was like 5 years ago, and then 2 years ago they come knocking on his door. Oh, about that wind turbine, can you help us? But he didn't help them. He didn't help them out then because he was so burnt from his previous experience. But is there been a change?
Yeah, very, very definitely. I mean, my history before I started working in CSE, I used to work in a wind farm consultancy trying to get planning permission for wind farms. And there it's kind of like attritional warfare. It's like trench warfare. And like, although the people that I worked with had all the great intentions, the relationship with kind of communities was really poisonous. And so I've seen a 180-degree change in attitude. And so when we do these kind of workshops, there are really the narratives that come up time and time are about the cost of living crisis, and people seeing that kind of increasing renewables, increasing the deployment of renewable energy is a way to build kind of energy security, both nationally and also locally, and build resilience. And particularly if we have kind of community-owned projects, which then allow communities to kind of capture their energy spending in the local community. Those kind of narratives come up time and time again.
Yeah, because they can feel proud. It's their baby. It's their turbines. They can even give them names. I don't know. But yeah, if they feel they've owned it, bottom up, like as you show, cool. Yeah.
I'll share. I'll just in the chat. I'll put this blog, which really sort of captures that. But anyway, I don't know who's next. Andrew?
Yes, please. Andrew will be next.
Yeah. Hi, Dan. Good to see you again, mate. Just a bit of a side almost from what you've been presenting, and we'll certainly be putting links on the Great Collaboration website to all the great things on offer from CSE. I went with our chief executive from SLCC to a parliamentary reception. I don't know if somebody from CSE was there. Yeah, we used your John, from the all-party parliamentary group about community energy. And what I learned from that is that I think a lot of people here already know that the national grid is not yet sufficiently resourced to accept extra energy from all sorts of parts of the country, simply because the infrastructure isn't in place. And so that particular group is focusing rather more on people being able to create and sell energy locally without having to go through the grid. There was an amendment put into a recent bill which was turned down, but the government then said, well, we'll do a consultation on this. And that was 6 months ago. So that group has got in touch with me saying, can we get local parish councils to be more up to speed with this and pressure their MPs to ask, why isn't this consultation happening? Can we have it, please? I mean, a lot of MPs are already supporting it. I suspect there are business managers in somewhere in the palaces of Westminster that says we can't do too many consultations at once. But this one, it seems to be particularly important to the topic we're talking about. I don't know if you've got anything else to add on that score, Dan.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I went to a couple of House of Commons sessions myself before Christmas and in January, and was making some of the same points. And basically, our kind of workshop, it's about kind of self-sufficiency and resilience, and it's kind of saying, you know, what proportion of your electricity could you generate to meet your own needs? But it's kind of, in a way, it's an artificial construct that we've built, because at the moment the kind of regulations don't allow people to kind of just trade electricity locally. You can't, you know, if you wanted to buy kind of electricity from your village hall roof, back to that scenario, you couldn't really do that in a straightforward way without going through a big supplier, basically. And that's crazy, and that means that it kind of erodes the sort of public support for the local rollout of renewables. So I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I mean, there have been one or two pilots about if your electricity substation can take the weight, getting into partnership with one of these national energy suppliers, probably a green energy one. I can't remember which was the one that was being used, and you do a deal with them saying, you give me a slightly better return on the electricity, and then you sell it as well at a lower rate than the national average to people in the substation area. I haven't heard how that particular pilot has been going on, but I think that if you've got the right kind of substation that can do that, and if you've got the right energy things, I mean, we're looking at putting 27 panels on our village library, community library, and the next door neighbour is the doctor's surgery, and they're fascinated. They'd love to. They use a lot of electricity. They'd love to get it more cheaply.
I mean, I think if you've got somebody right next door that's a heavy user, that could benefit, what you could do is put in what's called a private wire, which is you kind of, you know, you literally pipe that electricity next door before it goes through the meter, before it kind of feeds into the grid. And that's a kind of workaround. But again, it's putting copper into the ground that you shouldn't be having to put into the ground.
No, yeah. Unfortunately, there's a service road in the way. It would probably cost about 15 grand to 20 grand to put in the ground. So sadly, but good point. If it was right next door, and I believe there's a parish I know in Somerset that have done that. They've managed to work out something with panels. It didn't really work on their building because it was a metal roof, but they've found panels on the next door scout hut, and they've done it that way. Yeah. So there are different ways of doing it. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Stuart, I think you were next.
Hi, thanks. I really enjoyed that presentation. I do have a sort of real question. I've got a feasibility study for putting solar panels on one of our village halls. They say it should be a 72 kilowatt system with batteries, simple payback period of 8 years. But the council is very risk averse and is broke. And the other problem I've got is that one of my predecessors put this forward as a plan, and went out to 3 local installers and got 3 very different quotes. So they couldn't really be compared. So the council couldn't sort of select the best bid.
Yeah.
So what I would like is somebody to design a system that I could then go out to tender with, get 3 quotes, and then who could I turn to fund it?
Oh, I see. I mean, what comes to mind for me, if the sort of council don't have the resources to do that, is could you do it as a sort of community energy project? Could you set up a community energy group and do a kind of share issue? And so people would buy shares in your community energy group. The community energy group was set up, it would own the asset on the roof, and then the kind of profits would be kept in the community, and you pay everybody back that invests, that buys shares, a specified return, but any profit generated over that stays in the community. That's what kind of comes to mind. In terms of the kind of detailed specifications for kind of solar panels, I don't know enough about them to really advise on that. It's not my, I'm a sort of generalist, and every one of these fields is specialists that are way more specialized than I am. So I can't advise on that, I'm afraid.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd suggest looking into kind of community energy groups.
Yeah.
You look at Community Energy England, they've got loads of information about how you would sort of set up a community energy group and get that started. And the government's recently reopened the Community Energy Fund. It's kind of administered regionally, so each region has its own fund, and they kind of offer grants and loans to sort of look into the feasibility of projects like this, basically. So that what you're saying sounds ideally placed to get that sort of funding. Okay, so I'd look into that if I was you.
Okay, thanks for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm not sure who was next. I think maybe Tristan, you were next. Tristan.
Yeah, thank you. I just wondered how much emphasis you can put onto energy storage schemes as well as the renewable generation.
Yeah.
Because I hear a lot of there's a sort of worry about battery storage in bulk because it's expensive. There's a big worry about the resilience of the grid, and we want to be independent of it. So there are schemes like compressed air schemes or splitting water into hydrogen, and all those sorts of things. Are any of those viable, and do those get discussed in your workshops?
They don't tend to get discussed in a workshop because there's so much complexity in them, and it's kind of like you could use. I absolutely agree with you, but there's only so much you can do. There's already quite a lot of explaining to get people to understand all the different technologies and the planning impacts they would give rise to. And we took the view that sort of energy storage was one complexity too many, if you see what I mean. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the kind of main challenge going forward is not the absolute amount of renewable energy kit that we have installed, but ensuring that we have the right amount of renewable electricity at the right time to meet our needs. Essentially what we've got is we've got a very spiky energy demand nationally. So, moment by moment, day by day, kind of energy demand goes up and down. And then with kind of renewable energy, a renewable electricity supply, we've also got a very spiky supply, basically. And what you need to do is get these two spiky things to match perfectly in order for the lights to not go out, basically. And so storage in all its forms plays a role in kind of matching that kind of the demand profile to the kind of our supply profile, basically. So yeah, I absolutely agree.
And my impression is that if you're going to look at a big energy storage scheme, you need to be working at a bigger scale and a parish, because I know there's one that I can't remember how it works quite, but it's a sort of it's £1 million, and it's a big installation. I think I'm not sure it's compressed air, but it's something that drives the turbine. But it needs that, you need a bigger area to make it viable, as I understand it.
I think that's probably right, but I don't feel that I know enough about that to kind of give a very reliable answer. Apologies.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. Mike? Oh, I can't hear you, Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
Sorry. Thanks very much for that, Dan. That was really, really interesting. I'm working in HLY on the Community Resilience Initiative. I sent you a private message with my email and so on. So I'll probably get in touch with you for a little bit of help on our energy pillar. But what I wanted to ask a question, which was one more to do with politics. How is the Labour Party's national energy company going to affect all of this? Are we going to continue to be able to have community energy generation, or are they going to just take over the entire energy scene in the UK? Do you know any more about what you think is happening?
Good question. And I have looked into this, probably about 3 or 4 months ago, but it's all gone very quiet. And so I don't know if anything has changed to that plan. But as I understand it, the idea is that it would essentially all be about kind of community energy. And the Great British Energy Company would be about kind of supporting community energy groups to sort of do their thing, really, and to sort of increase and enable their ability to do that, basically. So yeah, as I understand it, it wouldn't be swamping everything.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Tristram, sorry. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. Oh, okay, fair enough. I was just going to say, if people do plan to use the kind of future energy, our approach, and we really hope you do, obviously get in touch with us if you need any help. And then also, if you could just let us to know that you are planning to do that, because it would be great to kind of report to our funders, as to how things are going, because we want to collect data on the impact our work has. Yeah.
Now,
Okay.
I do have another question for you, just partly aimed at you and partly at Tristram, which is, are you aware of any arrangements by which the power companies are being invited to let us know where we could provide power to the grid, or more distinctly, where we will not be able to for the next 20 years or something? Because people want to know, if we're going to make this sort of investment, can we actually link it in?
Yeah, it's a big question. Well, what's happening is that obviously we've talked about the kind of reinforcement of the grid. And so as time's going on, the government's doing a great deal of work to actually kind of to do that, to plan the kind of reinforcement of the grid and make that happen. And it's got all sorts of plans that will be coming out to sort of sort of outline where that will happen, basically. And so particularly at a national level, looking at how the transmission network, the big pylons and big 132 kilovolt lines, where they will go, basically. I don't think we have a full picture of where that all is yet, but essentially the government is kind of working on that. And then in terms of your kind of distribution network, so what you have is you have the kind of the national grid of really high voltage lines, the big pylons, and then you have the distribution grid, which is operated by your distribution network operator, and that's probably the network that you're going to feed into, basically, if you do a community energy project. Both of those systems, and particularly the distribution grid, the local systems, are pretty much at capacity in many parts of the country, really. And so the thing to do is engage with your DNO, your distribution network operator, to find out where that capacity is, basically. And many of them have maps showing where that is, basically. And many of them are trying their best to really engage quite proactively with community energy groups.
And just to add to that, we're talking to one of them, the UKPN, one of the DNOs.
Oh yeah.
And they've got a lot of data in a GIS system and maps and all sorts, very, very complex there. It's hard to understand, but they're in principle, they seem to be happy to share that data. So we're looking at it, including some of that data in Parish Online in due course.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the next question I had for you, Dan, was just give an ignoramus like me a sort of a back of the envelope guesstimate on how long it takes to put up one of those little wind turbine things that you suggested for your Cotswold village or your North Somerset village.
Well, unfortunately, at the moment, it takes far, far too long. So we gave some support to kind of Avonmouth. Do you know the community-owned wind turbine in Avonmouth? It's basically one of the biggest turbines that went up in the last few years. And we gave them some help early in the stages of their project. And I think we had a conversation back with them. I think it was in about 2015 or 2016. And it's taken them sort of, I think it's 8 years to get that spinning. So it's kind of like, it's much, much too slow. And particularly in terms of onshore wind, we had the kind of de facto ban of onshore wind that I think was about 2015, 2016 that came in. That has loosened slightly. And there are more avenues. If you've got a community-owned wind turbine that you're wanting to develop, there are various avenues you can take to get planning permission for that without having to wait on your council to get a supportive policy in place. But nevertheless, it's far too slow and it's much too difficult, basically. So yeah, sorry, that's not very encouraging, but
No, I was just thinking in terms of tying it in with the DNOs and their capacity. If they're sort of 8 or 9 years away,
I see what you mean.
and your wind turbine is going to take 5 years before you can actually get it up and running, then those two timescales can be merged a little.
Yeah, they can. And like the government is trying its best to speed up the process of connecting into the grid. It's obviously trying to sort of reinforce the grid so it's got more capacity, and also to kind of streamline the process. And the most important change that's happened recently is there used to be just a kind of a ticket system to get in line for a grid connection. So it's, when you go to the supermarket and you go to the meat counter and they hand you a ticket and you wait in line, that's how it used to work for the kind of grid connections. And so whether you were advancing your project or not, you still had a ticket, and the people behind you would just have to wait whether you were doing anything or not. And so it meant that you had all these kind of zombie projects that weren't happening, but they still had their place in the queue. And so that's changing so that it's a kind of use it or lose it connection agreement, and that will speed things up. But there's loads of other changes as well.
But again, Dan, if my understanding is that it's the connection is the longest delay, even longer than the planning. So again, it feeds back to this idea that if you could be off grid and have a storage scheme that had the capacity, then maybe you should short circuit the whole thing, and that the national grid ought to be delighted because it would create real resilience.
I agree. I think we've started to see many more projects coming forward where you've got co-located a solar farm and storage, or onshore wind and storage. And what you tend to have is that there's kind of capacity problems in the local distribution grid, but it may be that there's sometimes where there's capacity to feed in, and then there's sometimes that there aren't. And so if you've got your generation asset and the battery, it enables you to kind of make the most of the connection and the capacity that there is there, because whilst you can't connect into the grid, you can feed into your battery. Now, I'm sure there's a great deal more detail to it than I can that I don't know about, but yeah, there is potential to do that. And what I'm going to do is I've put in, I wrote an article following one of these House of Commons events, and I'll just put it in the chat in case you're interested, because I think there's lots that we can do to kind of, I guess, solve the connection problems that we're not currently doing, basically. So anyway. Okay, were there any other further questions?
I did have a huge desire to say thank you, Dan, because I find that all of these speeches that we get on these weekly discussions are hugely reassuring and supportive, because for all the problems that we appear to be facing, there seems to be a whole bunch of new ideas coming through, a lot of enthusiasm at the community level. And most of what we're looking at is ways of harnessing all those energies to actually make progress. And it's hugely encouraging to see all that.
I absolutely agree. I'm sort of we're giving support to the Northwest Energy Hub, administering their community energy fund. And so we're talking to lots of community groups that are getting funding to do their projects. And that is really inspiring stuff, and some really big projects. So it's very encouraging, and just, I think there will be more support for community energy, the community energy sector going forward. Fingers crossed, anyway.
And that sort of new fund that you suggested coming from the government, does that suggest that the government itself is getting the hang of the fact that community level support is possible and a good idea?
No, I sort of still think that the government, I feel like it's in love with large projects that you can, and commercial projects that you can sort of, you can have an opening day and cut a ribbon. And like it sort of, and it hasn't really grasped the fact that what community energy offers is, as well as the actual renewable energy generation that it's producing, is community consent. Because for every community project that you've got coming forward, they're doing great things to sort of engage their community and deliver local benefits. And so for every one of those projects, you've got a whole community that's potentially becoming more energy literate. And it's a way of building support. And I don't think they see that.
Right. Well, somewhere on the way, we've generated a couple more questions. So perhaps we could ask Stuart to come through, please.
Yes, I was just going to say that I think the local energy generators, I'm thinking of Northwest Electricity, I think.
Yeah.
But my brother has approached them and they have a green target to hit. So they're very keen to support bigger community energy projects. And I think he's currently thinking of district heating, using heat pumps and get the heat from the Lancaster Canal.
That sounds great. Yeah, that sounds absolutely great. Is that, who was the energy body you spoke about? Was that one of the local
I
hubs?
think it was Northwest Electricity or whoever the
Yeah, so like the DNO.
yes.
Okay, yeah, I think that's true.
But it's probably worth contacting them, say that if they have got these green targets, they might be keen to help
Yeah.
certain projects.
That sounds good. Yeah,
Okay, thanks.
you're welcome. Andrew?
Hi. From my own experience, a government quite often doesn't really seem to notice much about town and parish councils, and they do seem to like picking on big projects. I mean, I've seen that with them getting excited about civil servants excited about a £6 billion pilot on retrofitting, that it's only happening in Manchester and Birmingham, and it's going to take 3 years from next year and so on. And that was like the bee's knees as far as they were concerned. Well, okay. So I think there are things to be doing. I've just today had an email from government training organisation, government events, wanting to go about getting climate action together with your community. And there's no mention of town and parish councils in it at all. So I got back to them saying, hello, there is a sector of local government that's nearest to the community. Thank you very much. And I've mentioned this to them before. Can we talk? So I mean, this is what we're doing, obviously, with the great collaboration as well. And to answer your question last time, Mike, I'm still pursuing the Welsh connection where we're about that. But we do need to keep going away at this, because I don't know if it's even apathy, really. They're just so busy. I always think of the local government association. It's like local government and central government at that level are like two Mexican knife fighters, and they got each other by the wrist. And they're so busy arguing about this, and we got a new duty, therefore you give us more money, and all that stuff. And that seems to be happening quite irrespective of what's happening in the rest of the country. But this is what we've set our hand to. We'll get there. But my word. Anyway, never mind.
Well, I'm
No,
looking at the wonderful contrast that Somerset provides. So you had the example that Dan's just given of Avonmouth's sort of privately supplied wind turbine, only just up the road from a multi-billion-pound disaster called Hinkley Point. The one is not going to lose any money. In fact, it's going to be very beneficial to the community. And who knows what Hinkley Point's going to end up doing if it actually ends up generating electricity. Anyway.
Sarah, did you have a question?
Well, it's not actually a question. It's just a comment on what Andrew has just said about the lack of government knowledge and initiatives to involve parish and town councils, and we're up against this all the time. Andrew, can you and I do a pincer movement, please, on NALC? And we really need to squeeze the NALC initiative to get this moving, because I think they forget us sometimes. NALC is the National Association of Local Councils. But Dan, can I thank you for some very useful information? I live in Kent. The background picture has nothing to do with Kent, and it's Wales. And I'm hitting my head against a brick wall at the moment in my area, which is Tunbridge and Malling. And there's loads of people doing things, but we can't get everybody to work together. But I'm sure it'll come. And all your useful information. And I have actually seen somebody put a piece in about the update of the calculator I did attend a meeting on that, but had to leave halfway through it. So I'll send the slides out to Graham, who might be able to circulate them from that launch. And there's another one later in the year. I'm terribly behind on my catching up with emails. So Graham stroke Andrew, I'll get that across to you ASAP.
That's great.
Thanks, Sarah. Lovely job.
Pleasure. Thanks again, Dan. Excellent
thanks.
presentation.
Thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Throw in a question for everyone which has been triggered by the recent conversation. How effective is it to grab your local MP and pummel him between the ears?
I think it's really effective. I think what I would, absolutely do that, because I mean, kind of, I don't know the extent to which they're aware of kind of what kind of parish and town councils can do in terms of kind of, I guess, convening debate and sort of getting people to talk about these things and supporting local action. I don't know whether, to what extent it's on their radar, and what they know about kind of community energy. Many of them may know nothing about it. So I think I definitely recommend that. And just touching on Sarah's comment, I know many councils, I mean, 75 to 80% of councils have now got a climate emergency declaration, and many of them have got kind of staff in place in sustainability or climate teams. And part of their role is often to try and sort of support civic action on climate. And so it's probably worth your while seeing if you've got anybody like that in post in your local authority and getting in contact with them. And if they're not doing anything to sort of bring people together in the way that you want, suggest it strongly. Those are my suggestions. Hope that's useful. Sarah, you're on
Quickly come back in. It's them I'm having problems with.
I see. Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yes, and there is actually it's the next level up. It's the borough and district councils that seem to have this block, and then the counties. We need the whole lot to talk together. And in Kent, they don't know what communication between the tiers really is. And we have a prospective new MP, and I'm just about to email her office to say, can I have a meeting, please? She may be able to. She might find that useful for the election later this year.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good.
Go for it. Yeah.
Oh, I will be. Don't worry, Andrew.
I don't doubt it for a second.
Somebody's promised to set up a meeting with me with this prospective MP, and nothing's happened. So the boot will be going in there first.
Okay, good luck.
Well, Dan, let me say a very heartfelt thank you to you for this presentation. It was splendid. I think we all got a lot of entertainment, fun, and great ideas and reassurance out of it. So it was a pleasure to have you. And before we finish, Andrew would like to say a word.
Oh, I would, only. This is about next week, is it, Graham?
Oh, sorry. No, I was looking at this, your symbol of the hand, and it wasn't a hand raised, it was a hand clapping. So you were just saying thanks to Dan. But I can state to the assembled audience that out of a huge number of volunteers, Andrew has persuaded us that his is the most viable cause for next week's discussion. So we will be discussing the biodiversity net gain requirements that parishes are required to sort out. And our local expert will be giving you all the knowledge you need as of next Wednesday.
Yeah.
So thank you all very much indeed for coming. Looking forward to seeing you in the future, and have a wonderful time chasing Easter eggs and the rabbit over the weekend.
Rabbit, yes.
Thank you very much.
Nice to
Take
meet
care
you.
all.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.